Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Annapolis. Let's call the roll. I'm present.
Mr. Cummings?
Present.
Butler?
Present.
Bellamy?
Present.
Okay.
And Klein is present also.
I didn't hear that.
Alex Klein is present also.
Oh, okay, good. All right, and we're expecting Mr. Svakianudis in person. I'd like to point out to anybody who's watching this that 3, if not 4 of our colleagues are now in or near the state of Florida. I don't know if that reflects upon their wise use of time and space, or if they're just running away from things. But in any case, we do have a quorum, and I'd like to take a look at the agenda. It's rather light tonight. Consists really of only 3 things: findings on the fence legislation that we discussed so thoroughly last month, and expansion of childcare options, and then thirdly, a continuing presentation of rezoning, which I'm told will be quite exciting this evening. So if are there any additions or corrections to that agenda? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Any second?
I second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, the agenda's approved. By the way, I would like to congratulate all of you who are on remote for having, taken the effort to be here. Thank you. Approval of minutes. All had a chance to see them. Any corrections or edits? Motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay.
All right. And a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving those minutes? Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any nays? All right. Approved. No administrative business. So I'd like to move into the public hearing on the expansion of childcare options. And I believe we have the inestimable Mr. Lashinsky here to present and expand on his very well-written staff report.
Good evening. Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning, Department of Planning and Zoning. This is a pretty straightforward piece of legislation, 0125. It's an extension or expansion of legislation that you found favorable and was adopted by City Council in October of last year that was called the Expanded Daycare Act, I believe. And I think it was 01324. So whereas that legislation was focused on allowing for childcare facilities in more of the zoning districts in the city to enable more childcare facilities throughout the city and really meet a demand that's existing. This legislation is more limited. It's more focused on staying in step with state law, state regulations that have been updated related to childcare facilities. So creating more consistency between the city's code language and the state code language. But there are some things in here that in adopting the state regulations, we're able to provide some greater flexibility in certain cases to childcare facilities. And one example of that is that the state now allows for home childcare facilities to go up to 12 children. So there's a category of family childcare center, in-home childcare that goes up to 8 children, and that's in the city code currently. Now the state allows for a 9 to 12 child operation, and so now we can have that in our code as well. And well, it seems a bit modest, but it can make a difference. Certainly in a neighborhood scale childcare facility in someone's home, they can meet a greater demand. The other thing I want to point you to, it's actually one of the amendments that's attached to this legislation. Amendment 1 eliminates the parking requirements for the daycare facilities when they are in-home, or I believe, let me just double check. I believe it's really any of the childcare facilities. I'm looking at it. Off-street parking requirements, that is. So this was an amendment sponsored by Alderman Savage. This was the idea being that parking, as we all know, adds considerable costs to projects, creates obstacles to permitting in some cases, and it's an effort to create more flexibility for childcare facilities that are being created, whether in an existing structure or a new build situation. And so I think that amendment is a worthwhile thing. It doesn't mean that the childcare facility operator won't have any off-street parking. They simply can make that decision for themselves and determine whether their clients, the families that they're going to come there, would benefit from having the off-street parking, or if they're in a situation where there's adequate parking nearby and it won't hurt their business to not have the off-street parking. So they can make that determination. I'm fully confident of that. I think that's the extent of it. There was one other. There was one other amendment. Before I should say this too, that corrects something in the legislation, which is related to the critical area. That's the 1,000-foot buffer from the waterways that is more regulated in the Chesapeake Bay area of Maryland. So the legislation had said that both in-home childcare facilities and just regular childcare facilities that are not in a home could be allowed in the resource conservation area of the critical area, and that's the most strictly regulated of the critical area. That should only be for the in-home childcare facilities, essentially residential structures that are already in the resource conservation area. Those are already allowed to exist for childcare. So this legislation is also allowing for the larger in-home, but it should not allow for the general childcare facilities, which in essence could mean a new structure or a larger structure. And that would really go against the intent of the resource conservation area. So it's confusing, but I'm happy to answer questions on that last part. I think that's it. Thank you.
Any questions? Well, it's obviously a well-drawn piece of legislation. It's well thought out. The amendments do seem quite simple but important and compelling. Any comments on this? All right. I will open the public hearing. Since there's nobody else in the room but the comprehensive planning staff, I will close the public hearing. Any discussion here?
Well, I'd just like to point out that I appreciated sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to step on you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that
and this is no surprise coming from me, but the amendment about the parking, I think, is very good. But this all seems very very straightforward and common sense legislation. So I'm definitely in support.
Agreed.
And I would just add that I appreciate the research that shows not only in Annapolis, but, statewide, we are lacking in, or there's been a demand for more childcare facilities. So this is pretty straightforward in my mind as well.
Okay. Let's move this right along. Do I hear a motion to approve, including the two amendments?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor of recommending approval of this legislation, including the two amendments, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Aye.
Okay. Any nays? Very good. All right, we can move that along. Good job. Before we get into the rezoning, I think, oh no, this is actually next on the agenda. We need to do the findings for, on the fences. Have you all had a chance to read them?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes,
Good. Any changes? You all had the opportunity to make comments or any edits? Anything at this point? Thank you.
I think we're ready to go.
Yeah. I might say that I wrote this, and I did not write it in the usual formal style. I wrote it in order to try to communicate the things that we really talked about, and I thought that we came up with excuse me? There's a bird caught in our communication system somewhere. I thought that we came up with some potentially very productive suggestions about how to determine the amount of, call it secondary, a vacant space or negative space or non-occluded space. We danced around all those terms, but we came up with, I thought, a fairly clear and simple way to determine so that there's ventilation and so forth, and leaving fence builders creativity. The other thing was the proposal came to us because of a fence that was built on top of a rise, so that a 6-foot fence on the top of the rise looked enormous to the people at the bottom of the rise. And I would really ask Mr. Cummings, even though he's in the midst of emergencies, but he's always in the midst of emergencies, if he might come up with a simple diagram that we could send along to the city council, just to sort of be able to visualize what we're talking about, so that a fence at the top of the rise would not be 6 feet. It would look like 6 feet. I'm not good enough to figure out, the percentage of the grade and so forth. But if you can come up with something simple and explanatory, we can move it along, and we can circulate it and add it to the recommendation.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. I apologize that I didn't get that to you already. Is shortly after the last meeting, I got deployed down here to Florida for a disaster deployment. But I will create that and pass it by you to make sure that we get everyone's view on it before I hand it over. But I will get to that.
Great. All right, thanks. All right, any other comments on the findings? All right. All in favor? Do I hear a motion to approve those findings?
So moved.
All right, and a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
All right. Any nays? None. Approved. Thank you very much. I thought it was a great meeting on this stuff, by the way.
And you did a good job on the findings, by the way. It's very good.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Signed. I'll get a copy to Mr. Savage. All right. Now we can move on to the amusing and entertaining portion of the meeting tonight, which is continuing updates on rezoning. I have been asked, by the way, by Julian Jacques of the IT department to hold your questions till the end because it gets complicated switching back and forth between the presentation and the questions. So write them down, hold them till the end, and then we can discuss. Mr. Lashinsky and Madam,
Okay.
please introduce yourself again.
Sure. Alexis Robinson, Senior Comprehensive Planner.
Ms. Robinson, welcome.
Thank you again for having us to give you, I think this is our third or fourth update on the comprehensive rezoning work we're doing. So Alexis and I are going to share the presentation. Casey, our other comprehensive planner, contributed heavily to this as well. He is out sick, so he is watching from home, I'm sure. Tonight, we're going to focus exclusively on the Tyler Avenue overlay district piece of this comprehensive rezoning work. We introduced the idea last time, and I'll give a brief overview of the entire extent or scope of our comprehensive rezoning work before getting into that. But real quickly, when we talk about comprehensive rezoning, we're talking about this, bringing about better consistency between the comprehensive plan, the zoning map, and the zoning code. Comprehensive plan that I'm talking about is, of course, the one that the Planning Commission advanced to City Council last year and was adopted unanimously by City Council. Annapolis Head 2040 is what it's called. And it has many, many goals and recommendations for the city for the coming years. But here are just a few of the ones that could be affected by our zoning code, which is the most significant tool for regulating land use in the city. We've broken up our comprehensive rezoning work into 4 phases. Right now, we're in this phase 1, and we are working on this through the spring. We're working on a timeline here that is set by the City Council with the election coming up in November. There's a rule passed by City Council, or maybe by the city's law office, that simply says no new zoning legislation can be introduced after June 16th. So we're working towards that with this phase 1, which includes plan development text amendments and the Tyler Avenue overlay district. And you'll hear more at the next meeting about the plan development piece, presumed from our planning director, I believe. But tonight we're going to focus on Tyler Avenue, which is something our team has been spending most of our time on. But you can see how these phases will go into consolidating the zoning districts of the city from our 31 different zoning districts. We're going to trim that down to a more reasonable number. That's phase 2. And we shared some of that analysis already in past presentations. For those who haven't seen that, they can go back to the website that I'll share in a second. Phase 3 and phase 4 get into form-based zoning standards that are talked about quite a lot in the comprehensive plan. So this is essentially a 3-year program, and we hope to move through and stay on schedule. Each phase is going to include analysis, recommendations, and community input. through a variety of formats. And ultimately, we hope to advance something to the city council through legislation that they can adopt. That's the ultimate goal here, and confident that we'll be able to do that. We're going to be having some public in-person meetings for this first phase, starting most likely in April. The website snapshot you can see here is on our city's planning and zoning website, and you can really just type in comprehensive rezoning Annapolis, and it'll take you right to this. We have video clips of all our past presentations to the Planning Commission and the PDFs and the schedule here, and we'll post upcoming meetings here as well. So please check that out. All right, without further ado, we're going to get into this Tyler Avenue Overlay District, which we're excited about. It's an idea that we had been thinking about and then was really reinforced by Alderman Gay, whose Ward 6 includes the large portion of this area. And he was really looking for something that could enable more housing options in this area to meet a pressing need. So I just want to share in a few slides what we mean by overlay district. These are slides we've shared in the past presentations, but I'll quickly go through them. Overlay district is essentially overlaying an additional set of standards onto the base zoning that exists. So we have a couple in the city already in the Eastport area. One's called the Eastport Gateway Conservation Overlay, and one's called the Office and Commercial Design Overlay. Both of these zones apply additional standards that are sort of site-specific. So there's standards that really are designed to reinforce certain outcomes that benefit the Eastport area as a unique part of Annapolis. And so point being, this isn't a new idea for Annapolis or really anywhere else. It's kind of a proven strategy as a planning tool. When we look at the Tyler Avenue area, and we're going to be providing a whole lot of interesting analysis tonight that will kind of justify our approach to Tyler Avenue, or try to justify it. But this is kind of the teaser. I mean, what we're really looking at is an opportunity to unlock opportunities for more missing middle housing types, which this is a well-known graphic that helps explain this wide range of housing between single family detached houses and higher density apartment buildings. This missing middle range of housing used to exist in great number in the city, and has mostly been zoned out. Many of our residential zones don't allow for these missing middle housing types today. So this was well documented in the comprehensive plan. Complete streets. City builds very few new streets. Most of the streets we have are not complete. They're streets that are hard to walk on, or hard to bike on. They don't necessarily have street trees. They don't necessarily have enough pedestrian crossings. They don't necessarily have green infrastructure, stormwater management. All of these things we do implement in a piecemeal way in places all over the city. But we have an opportunity on Tyler Avenue to do more than that, to actually look at it holistically. And so this is a concept that a lot of communities are embracing all over the country. Basically designing a street for all users, not just cars. And then finally, this is a glimpse of Tyler Avenue today. We have an opportunity to create a more consistent neighborhood character that privileges walkability and quality of life. And we had some standards for neighborhood character in the comprehensive plan that applied to mixed use, but along this corridor, we're looking at a primarily residential corridor. So I think many of these neighborhood character elements are consistent, but just wanted to note that. So we're calling this the Tyler Avenue Complete Community Overlay District. This is a term, complete community, that originated in Vancouver in the 1970s and has had some traction in communities all across North America. Basic idea is we can design and regulate and codify community development that has everything a healthy community should have. Range of housing types, high quality streetscapes with street trees and ample space for walking or biking, transit use, green stormwater infrastructure, access to park space, to schools, to conveniences and shopping. And we do have places like this in the city today. Tyler Avenue is one that could be a complete community, but is not today, even though it supports an incredible diversity of people. So we're going to talk about what's there today. And this is just a glimpse of a typical street view on Tyler Avenue from Google. And you can see how small these sidewalks are, fences pushed all the way up, just the kind of inconsistent character of the street. The first thing to note about this project and why we identified it, why Alderman Gay identified it, is that we have probably one of the most unusual lot configurations in the city. You can see in the image on the right, there's an incredible number of long, narrow lots on this Tyler Avenue corridor. Now we're going from Bay Ridge Avenue on the right, kind of bends where Tyler Avenue becomes Hilltop Lane, and then we go down to meet Forest Drive. And you can see where we're located in the city, close to Truxton Park, Annapolis Middle School, very well located to a lot of conveniences. Majority of this area, sort of darker line, defines the parcels that we're looking at. This is mostly the R2 zone. It's kind of a single family detached housing zone. The R3 in orange is slightly more dense than R2, allows for townhouses and some smaller apartments. And then the red here is B2. That's where the Annapolis Seafood Market site is at Forest Drive. And that's a community and convenient shopping areas. Also want to note that we're cutting across a few different wards. Although Alderman Gay brought this idea forward to us, and we initially were looking at the portion that was only in Ward 6 in pink here. After further analysis, we've expanded to include this portion in Ward 7 along the south side of Tyler Avenue, and then the northern lots that are in Ward 8. 3 different wards are impacted directly by this, and then Ward 5 is just outside the boundary to the left here. If you look at Tyler Avenue today, I think the thing that you'll see is quite a range of conditions on these lots. There's a lot of fencing, a lot of vacancy, a lot of small houses on large lots, almost like the closest thing to like Little House on the Prairie you might find in Annapolis. Just very strange relationship between the existing houses and the lots they sit on. This image on the bottom right gives you a glimpse where you have 2 small houses with a large driveway entrance and an enormous vacant lot in the back. You have lots that are homes that are in stages of being torn down and rebuilt. You have vacant lots, and you have a mix of single family and duplex and some unusual conglomerations of houses as well. So this gives you another glimpse of some other things. You have bus stops throughout this corridor. This image in the here is actually a small dirt road that is apparently a city street that has 3 houses on it. It's called Stephanie Lane. You have some very idiosyncratic situations on this street that, in some ways I don't want to diminish them, makes for an interesting place, but it also means a tremendous amount of inconsistency and kind of lack of consistent character, I would say. Hand it off to Alexis at this point.
Thank you, Eric. So this gives a glimpse of the kind of the historic layout of Tyler Avenue. In the top left from 1931, you can see the first aerials of the area that show Tyler Avenue as a throughway between early ideas of Forest Drive and Bay Ridge. This was an established roadway. By 1952, there was some residential development that was, branching off of Forest Drive. By 1962, there was a substantial amount of development and subdivisions occurring around Tyler Avenue. In the 70s, you especially have a lot of expansion throughout the entire city, but here on Tyler Avenue, the rest of the street is developed and the schools in place and established. That's Tyler Heights Elementary School. And then by the 80s, you can see the neighborhood is very established. There's not a lot of new development, and that kind of is consistent throughout the early 2000s and to today. But even in these aerials, you can see that there's probably still some expansion of the population within this area by the increase in the transportation infrastructure, such as the lanes on Forest Drive expanding and the elementary school, which recently went under construction and had an expansion of classrooms and facilities. In the next slide here, you'll see a timeline history of different developments that have happened in this area of the city, including a railroad line that went from the established Baltimore and Annapolis rail line that extended down through Bay Ridge. This rail line did not last for very long, but it helped to establish a community in the area. While this area did start as rural farmland, by 1952, as stated before, there was a good amount of residential and commercial development. That development continued into the 70s, where even Robinwood Public Housing was developed and established across Forest Drive, and the population expansion impacted Tyler Heights Elementary School to it going under construction in 2017 and being completed in 2021. This slide details what the Social Vulnerability Index criteria for the area is. The Social Vulnerability Index, or CVI, is established by a few criteria, including socioeconomic status, housing availability and types, the composition of households, such as age, and minority status and language. As you can see, it may not especially be able to decipher, but the darker the color on the map, the higher the vulnerability of this area. And so within this project area or subject area, you can see that on the northwest side of Tyler Avenue is one of our most vulnerable census tracts within the city, but the others surrounding it in a slightly less darker blue, but still fairly dark blue, are still quite vulnerable compared to other parts of the city. Looking at kind of the population breakdown of the area as it is seen today and identified by the U.S. Census, there are about 243 household units. 84% of those households are occupied. but 16% are vacant as compared to 9% on the citywide scale vacancy. 58% of these housing units are owner occupied and 42% are renter occupied. On the city level, only about 40% of household units are renter occupied. 42% of these households are made up of 4 or more people, which is pretty big of families. There are even a significant number that have 7 or more people. But on a citywide scale, there's only about 17% of the households that have 4 or more people. This definitely shows that the population in this area has increased, and there is definitely a demand for a diversity of households that can accommodate different size families. You can also see by the colorful pie chart that this is a very diverse community. There's a significant amount of population for each racial group within this area, and the median income is about $90,000 compared to the citywide income of a little over 104,000. So it's a little bit under, but still within reason for the citywide, showing that this is a diverse but prosperous area, but they may not all the needs of that community may be met with the housing types that are included in this region.
And I think one other thing to note with the owner occupied and the renter occupied figures, even though it says citywide, renter occupied is 40%. I think if you look at the R2 zone specifically, citywide, you're going to find a much, much lower rate of rental. This is unusual to find a neighborhood that's primarily single family detached homes to have such a high renter population. So that's just a little bit more anecdotal, but just wanted to note that. This map kind of builds on what Alexis was talking about in terms of the land use of this area is unusual. You have very low density land use here. I mean, we did an analysis that showed there's about 52 acres within the site that we're looking at, the number of parcels along Tyler Avenue. When you calculate the number of units within those 52 acres, you end up with 2.28 units per acre. Now, that's only about a quarter of what the R2 zone is designed to have. R2 is supposed to have up to 8 units per acre. So we're just a small fraction of that. So this is a extremely low density area, and because of these large lots and the small homes on these large lots and the amount of acreage that's sort of unused. You see in pink are the building footprints, and gray are the driveways or the impervious surfaces beyond the homes, the buildings. There's just a blow in red dotted line is the blow up on the right. So you can kind of see white is everything outside of the building footprint and the driveways. And there's some in brown are the fence lines. So it's kind of unusual situation here. We're reinforcing. But in terms of transportation, you're in a transit hub here where there are transit lines circulating seemingly all over this corridor on the left. And then on the right, it's hard to see, but we're showing roadways, sidewalks, crosswalks, traffic signals. I think the key takeaway is that there are sidewalks throughout this area. It's you can't see through this map the condition they're in or quality they have. We'll show you some more information on that. But there's only one traffic signalized intersection. That's at Forest Drive in the lower left here. There's one crosswalk up in the northern part here. some more crosswalks here. But these are the kind of things that make for a very unsafe corridor as a pedestrian or bicyclist. You kind of have a drag speed raceway here. And that's been a consistent complaint, frustration among residents that many folks and city staff hear regularly. And that's frankly by design, it appears. There are a number of bikeways planned for this area. There's really only one in existence, which is the Hilltop Lane bike lane. And Bay Ridge Avenue has some bike lane as well, but it's kind of spotty. There are plans for bikeways along Tyler, along Forest Drive, along Forest Hills Avenue, and then a natural surface trail is going to be studied this year that is along the former rail line right through here. But even without these bikeways, the context of this neighborhood is extremely well connected to surrounding resources. So this is an interesting map. This is showing a walk shed from the area, showing 3-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute walks. So the darker pink is the 10-minute walk distance. And we make this by setting points along the Tyler Avenue corridor, 6 points at even increments, and then you measure out. And you can see within this walk shed, you have Tyler Heights Elementary, you have Annapolis Middle School, you have Truxton Park, you have shopping at the Eastport Shopping Center, Clock Tower Place. There's some retail convenience or convenience retail at Forest Drive and Tyler. Quiet Waters Park is not far away. So if we were to improve this area, create more housing options, we would be in a situation where residents would have a tremendous amount of resources at close distance. That's the benefit in seeing this context. These maps just kind of reinforce what we've already been talking about in terms of lot acreage and lot coverage. I think on the left, you can see a majority of these sites are more than half an acre, some more than an acre or close to an acre. That's the darker oranges. So you can see where the larger properties are. And on the right, you can see large majority of these sites are low developed sites with very minimal impervious coverage, less than 30% coverage. Those are the ones in white or lighter gray on right. So situations that we don't find very often in Annapolis. We look at tree canopy. These maps are very similar. The one on the right is showing tree canopy, just kind of traditional tree canopy measurement in terms of how much coverage of the area the canopy covers. We're pulling this data on tree canopy, I should say, from a new tool that the city arborist is using that provides, it's a digital remote sensing GIS tool. I'm sure Commissioner Cummings is very familiar with. I think it's called Planet Geo, but it gives us incredible detail information about every tree and property in the city where the trees exist. And you can see the tree coverage, 60% to 80%, 80% to 100% in darker greens. That's the map on the right. And then the lower tree coverage is the lighter greens. And then on the left, it's showing the benefits of the tree. It's basically with urban tree canopy, this is a metric that talks about the cooling effects of the trees. And so it's another way of looking at the benefits of the tree canopy, where those benefits are most felt within this corridor. And I think the takeaway from this is that there's a lot of parcels that have inadequate tree canopy. And so they're not shaded. They're not going to have the same kind of health benefits that leafier parts of the city might have. This is another way of looking at tree canopy. It's maybe the most intuitive way, where you kind of see these sort of clusters of forested area. There's a large cluster around Tyler Heights Elementary right here, and then you have smaller clusters throughout, but still a lot of open space that's not covered with canopy and in white. And there are no wetlands, no critical area in this area, this project area. So we're showing so much emphasis on tree canopy because it is a major goal from the comprehensive plan, and so we want to be mindful of how this project can augment the city's tree canopy and work with those goals. This is probably the most telling example of how we could do that. There's almost no street trees in this corridor. In red, we're circling the very few that are on the street. All the other dots that are on this map are showing street trees outside of our project area. And this is, again, information that we got from the city arborist through his mapping tool. So we have a huge opportunity to improve street tree canopy in this area. This is just, it's hard to see, but this is an attempt to start to look at some of the public realm opportunities that if we were to rezone this Tyler Heights corridor or create a overlay zone, we can put in standards that would help to create these public realm opportunities. We have a number of bikeways already planned for this area, but it goes without saying that on Tyler Avenue, where you have safety, is not good today. It's not a very pleasant street to walk on. We have an opportunity to do a complete street project, which would really mean that any new development would be held to a standard that would help create a more holistic streetscape, that has street trees and better lighting and street furnishings and bikeway and really do something that doesn't happen very often in the city. We're also showing some natural surface trail opportunities. I mentioned the trail along the former rail line through here. There's an opportunity to maybe connect to the trails that are at the SPCA right here, and then north of Hilltop Lane, the former rail line continues on Elliott Road. At the school, there's an opportunity to maybe build a more formalized community open space. Obviously, we would have to do that working with Anne Arundel County Public Schools, but the school backs up to large parcels that are undeveloped. So we'd have to work with those property owners as well. But there could be standards put in place to encourage that. Marta Lane currently ends at Janwall. It could extend further to create kind of a green street opportunity, and then connect back to Tyler at Stephanie Lane, which is that dirt road that I mentioned earlier. We're already talking about a major intersection improvement at Forest Drive, where the old Annapolis Seafood Market site is, with any new development that comes in there. And Robinwood right here is also going through a redesign and will be part of that project. So intersection improvements are something that really need to happen throughout this whole corridor to ensure safety and basically a more complete street condition. And then I'm just finishing here with some precedents. We haven't started formulating recommendations for this district yet. That's really, we wanted the analysis to lead that and not jump to conclusions, but you're starting to see how the analysis is pointing us. We typically look at precedents outside of the city and other places that are maybe ahead of us in certain ways. But, I think it's helpful to look at just two streets in the city, first off, that are two of our nicest residential streets. They handle a lot of traffic. Duke of Gloucester is on the left and Prince George Street on the right. They have great tree canopy. They are much higher density than Tyler Avenue today. These are probably 15 to 30 units per acre. And you can see what's possible even just in these historic conditions. These don't have dedicated bikeways, but they have great, generally great sidewalks and street trees and character. Looking elsewhere, Granville Road in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is what 17 units per acre could look like. And that actually came from a study that the Lincoln Land Policy Institute, I think that's what it's called. They tried to help people see what 15 units per acre looks like. That's become a goal for a lot of communities because it doesn't rock the boat too much in terms of, density. It definitely adds quite a bit of additional housing. And you're able to retain a really nice streetscape. Again, the R2 district today is like 8 units per acre, but you could double that and still have a great streetscape. On the right is Bryant Avenue, Minneapolis, which got a lot of national attention for going on a road diet and adding a 2-way cycle track, but is essentially similar condition to Tyler Avenue in terms of its width, maybe a bit wider, but similar types of houses on both sides, a lot of diversity of housing types. These are renderings that came out of the Eastport Choice Neighborhood Initiative project. That is the redevelopment of our largest public housing site. Now, I wanted to just share these because they give you a glimpse of what a redeveloped streetscape could look like that has different housing options combined with better quality park spaces, community amenities, transit, bikeways, ample pedestrian space. This type of quality, I think, is something we should aspire towards anywhere in the city. And then finally, I want to caveat this because this is taken from Portland, which, like many cities around the country, is looking to do a citywide missing middle initiative to really unlock housing opportunities citywide. That's not what we're doing here. We're being more strategic and we're looking at this Tyler Avenue corridor. But I like this graphic because it shows how granular this situation is, where we're trying to not be heavy-handed about this. We're sort of understanding that Tyler Avenue is going to evolve by individual property owners choosing to do things with their properties, with the tools we provide them and the rules that we provide them. This graphic kind of shows you if you incentivize or you allow for a variety of different housing types, you can create a really interesting, diverse neighborhood condition that fills in a lot of the spaces that are open today, creates combined community amenities that everybody can benefit from. And, I think ultimately creates a more interesting neighborhood. So when we talk about neighborhood character, it's not just about everything looking the same, but it is about meeting a certain shared standard that privileges public realm and housing design. And so I just thought this helps visualize what Tyler Avenue could become in the future. But it is challenging to find precedents because we're not designing this thing yet. I didn't want to give you too many renderings of other places that might be very ambitious. I was trying to find real places that exist today. The reality is hard to find those places, but I think that when we come back to you, we're going to have some better idea of where this is headed. So at your next meeting in April, and this is all on the website, the schedule, but we're going to be providing some draft recommendations of what we think standards for this Tyler Avenue overlay district could have. We're going to be launching a outreach campaign and really making sure we reach all the people who live in the neighborhood today and make sure we hear what they're interested in seeing and how we can help them. We'll be doing some community meetings, most likely at Pip Moyer, which is a good central location. And we're going to continue to update this website as we move forward. So that's the presentation for tonight.
All right. This could get a little complicated if we want to have comment on some of these slides.
I know. We were warned about that, but
One thing that strikes me about this, always struck me about this, with these narrow lots, deep narrow lots, is that if anything wants to be done to make it more dense and allow it to build organically, is some form of alleyway even behind these lots. And when you showed those potential extension of, forgot the name of the street, Mardan or Marda into
Marda Lane.
Janwall.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other one, anyway, and even on the other side of Tyler, I'm not quite sure. I'd have to look at the maps again to see what's possible and to see if people would, but not a full-scale road, but an alleyway, where cars could come in, you could access a garage, you could access a garage with a housing above it. You follow me?
Yeah.
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 So something and a lot easier to accomplish.
Yeah.
That's the first thought I've had about it. The other thought the other thought is there's going to have to be property consolidation.
Yeah.
And that's going to be pushing people out who now currently live in affordable housing.
Yeah, I should have mentioned something that is going through my head as we do this is that, allowing for more density is not going to necessarily ensure that these will be affordable to low or moderate incomes. And so there will likely need to be a policy attached to this that requires, one idea would be to lower the threshold for our MPDUs. Today, for this area, we haven't really workshopped this idea, but I do feel like, MPDU policy today is essentially 1 for every 10 units. You're doing a below market unit for every 10 market rate units. Perhaps there's a MPDU for every 4 or 5 units in this. But we need to find a balance. It's something that would actually not be prohibitive. I think that's, but it's a tricky dilemma, I would say.
Are you envisioning 3- and 4-story buildings along this street?
Potentially. We haven't studied that yet, but yeah.
It's a pretty big building.
Well, 3-story, I think, is not, that's more common. And once you get to 4 stories, it's not so common in the city. But
Anybody else? I'm sorry to have jumped in.
I like it. I'm all for the presentation. I think that it's really great. Bob, you had a really great comment with regard to alleyways. This is just from my own kind of professional background in planning and design. I've always hated this move towards creating cars that block the frontage of a house. I think that it's just it separates the people environment from the home environment in a way that you have that car breaking up a nice street front, and so an alleyway behind it would be really great. And and it wouldn't be that hard to just Elmar drive kind of already cuts in that area where you could create kind of a very narrow alleyway to access rear facing driveways. That'd be really great. But yeah, I think it's a great use of this land either way. I do want to point out that just because we allow for something doesn't mean that it will happen or that it will happen in a fast manner. This is something that, you know, when people have heartache about something or a rezoning or anything like this, just because you allow for something doesn't mean that it changes overnight. And it would be, you know, years and decades in the making, basically. But yeah, this is a great area for a lot of this kind of rethought, you know, rethinking of the process and how we lay out the city in this area. I particularly like the slide. Sorry, I particularly like the slide with regard to how many amenities are kind of within walking distance of this area. You got schools and parks and play, and not that far from commercial services as well. So it's a fantastic spot for us.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good point about it. We rarely try to predict the future because things happen so slowly here. I mean, even if we allow for some greater flexibility in this area, there's so many other things that are going to drive this. You know, could just frankly, the cost of building anything will just basically make it impossible to do things in the near future. So, yeah, it's a good reminder to folks who think, you know, who might be worried that even if we change something, everything's going to suddenly evolve rapidly. It just definitely doesn't in this town.
On that note, well, first of all, thank you for your presentation. It was terrific. On that note, have you discussed possible incentives that the city could offer to kind of help spur this along at all?
No, I mean, this is the perfect time to be suggesting something like that because we really, we're just coming out of this analysis phase. So that's the kind of thing that we want to look at for our recommendations and think about. It kind of goes to Commissioner Cummings' point about if we really want to put something into action, we may need to do that to create a certain incentive, you know, to really, I mean, providing this flexibility in the zoning may not be enough, you know, there may need to be some other push, you know, but.
Right. That's my thought exactly.
Yeah. We've talked in other circumstances.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying the only comments I have were, well, number one, the presentation was fantastic. I really liked the visuals. And I also liked how you pointed out how many amenities were in the area. It does make it a perfect place to add some density. But I had two questions. You answered one about trying to keep it moderately priced, and that may be, I mean, does that fall under your comments about public realm opportunities? So bike lanes would be one, trying to make affordable housing there might be another.
Yeah,
Is that what you call public realm opportunity?
What I mean by public realm is really any shared open space. And, you know, typically streetscape is the largest form of public space in the city. So when your streetscapes are dangerous for pedestrians or cyclists, they basically become kind of a wasted opportunity as a public space. So that's I guess kind of an initial thinking about public realm, but then places for the community congregate, whether it's new park spaces or reimagined park space or certain intersections where you could have seating, you know, plaza type space. Yeah, that's another part of public realm, or the trails that are going through wooded areas, you know, that's another form, but
and I was really happy that you included the tree analysis. I think that was going to be my other comment. what happens when you have two goals in the comprehensive plan that seem to conflict. So for instance, we're trying to increase our tree canopy to 50% by 20, it used to be 2036, it might be 2040 now. And, we're obviously going to be increasing impervious surface. So you mentioned that many of the properties are under 30% impervious coverage. And I realize adding street trees is going to be a great way to help out with the tree canopy. But do you think there's possibly a way to say, if you take one of those parcels that's a half acre or 3/4 of an acre and say, if you add X% of impervious surface, you're going to retain some amount of tree canopy? And I don't know what that number is, but somebody like Brian Adams could work on that with some of the tree experts that do this stuff for Planet Geo.
Well, yeah. One thing to note is that, as Bob suggested, if properties are consolidated, you might quickly get up to that threshold that will trigger the forest conservation requirements. So which I think is 40,000 square feet.
40,000 square feet.
Yeah.
43.
So some of these properties are already enormous. And so I think some of that will kick in. The other thing is, part of the reason why there's no street trees today is that there's no sidewalk space. So the properties go right up to this very narrow sidewalk, and there's no incentive for the property owners to plant trees in their front yards. And so, creating that healthier streetscape will certainly expand our tree canopy. But I could definitely see having some standards that encourage more tree planting. We're not going to get the tree planting unless there's some redevelopment happening, I think. I just don't think that.
I agree.
Yeah, but being more efficient with the land that's there, so that embedded in all of this, or it's like implied, I would say, is that we would prefer to have density in place, in really efficient ways, and, less eating up all the land with house, but basically that last image from Portland, I think, is really helps explain, you could have a really substantial green area in combination with the housing. So, but it's all about how we structure these standards, I think. So, because today, let me also say, this is something that occurred to me as we were doing this analysis, is that part of the reason why you don't have any redevelopment on this corridor is that the only thing that's allowed is a single family detached house. And because of the character or the quality of the streetscape, and there's that the Annapolis pattern of, when you redevelop in the R2 zone, you just build the biggest house you can within the setback area. Nobody's doing that here because it doesn't make any economic sense. But if you open up the zoning to more opportunities for smaller units, cottage clusters, modest apartment home, I think there's going to be a lot more incentive to do something with some of these properties. But as of now, they're just, single family detached house is sort of just not the answer. So,
And right now, can these properties be subdivided at all?
Sure. Yeah. But the city has laws. I mean, we don't allow for flag lots. So you can't subdivide without having some access to the street. So that's one thing. You could condoize a property, essentially create two properties within a single property, as long as there's shared parking and access, pedestrian, a shared driveway. So there are ways to subdivide that could make it work, but they're challenging, I think, with the narrow lots. Yeah. But yeah, definitely subdivision.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So there are kind of two things going on here. One of them is to analyze what the zoning changes and building regulations are, should be in the future. Because the straight R2 keeps you confined to the current situation. Okay. So that's one thing that you're looking at. The other thing you're looking at is the streetscape, which is a matter of great public investment. And I guess that's the strategy question is it worth it, to redo the street and the rezoning and then see what happens over 10 years? I mean, okay. But that's a big investment.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a hard sell, I think, for the city because, we did that with Inner West Street, but there was this anticipated economic development return. It'd be interesting to do the math and see how much additional housing would sort of help pay for that public investment, in terms of future tax revenue, and that is the city's major source of revenue, of funding, is our property tax. So to have this much land that is not really providing any return, you could make a strong economic case there.
But the two have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, for sure.
You really have to go hand in hand. And if there's an alley, does that count as access in terms of back access to a narrow lot?
Yeah, I think as long as it's designed for a typical vehicle. Yeah.
But the post office the mailbox will be up on Tyler, whereas people would actually use back alley.
Yeah.
So it's about 60-40 owner renter. Right? About 60-40. And yes, the Portland graphic is useful in terms of showing something that is sort of positive, in the way it looks. Okay. All right. Anything else?
One more time with the rezoning, or any zoning, what is I know you said optimal rate about 15 units per acre. Was there a maximum number that you were shooting for?
No, that's a good question. I think we need to come up with some goals based on this analysis of what's reasonable within our, I think the R4 zoning in the city is up to 25 units an acre, I think. 20 or 25, I should know this. So yeah, I think R3 is maybe 12, I think 12 units an acre. So we'll have to find what the sweet spot is there. That doesn't seem like it's overwhelming the place, but
I think that there's the potential for limited city investment, at least up front, for redeveloping the whole streetscape and doing a lot, unless we, unless we go for one of those zones that allows for maybe 20, 25 per acre, because at 15 or 12 units per acre, that's going to limit kind of that long-term return on investment that we put into developing an area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ooh. It's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah.
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 I mean, Cummings just really sort of portrayed it, that in order to pay for a new streetscape, you've got to allow for 3 to 4-story apartment building.
Yeah, some of you may recall the economic presentation that we had last summer from the Urban 3 consultants. And
Yep.
I mean, this is essentially what they were saying through their analysis is that downtown and Eastport subsidize the rest of the city because of I mean, there you have waterfront also adds to their property values, but they have a certain density that helps as well a lot. And that's, I think what they were showing is that, that townhouse density, even going from single family detached to townhouse, was a tremendous increase in value per acre. So yeah, we probably will revisit that.
Oh, maybe there is a way to crack the nut. Okay. That's a good one. Any thoughts on the Annapolis Seafood intersection?
Nothing more to share on that, unfortunately. I mean, I think, well, the intersection, I could just say that I don't have much more to share on, new developments on that site, but what we continue to, anybody who's expressing interest in that site, we're being very explicit that we see that intersection as part of a opportunity. That is the opportunity to create a new standard for Forest Drive that changes the whole character of a typical intersection on Forest Drive to make it a place where a driver will expect to see pedestrians crossing the street and create places to urban places at the edges of the intersection. So we would expect an urban plaza type space as part of the development. And we know that HACA, that's redesigning Robinwood, I mean, they don't own the frontage, but they're trying to create a node just inside that intersection. They may have a community center or something like that. So, yeah, that's a big theme that we're expressing to anybody who's interested in that site.
Okay. Anything else?
I have a question now that you brought up that site. And again, I've heard of different groups being interested in that seafood site. One of them, and I don't know the validity of this, right? So I'm asking, was interested in putting a gas station there. And, my hope is that we would, as you said, is like create an area where the automobiles that are already driving through that area are induced to slow down and be more cautious, not to induce more traffic. That would actually be counterproductive to developing that area so it's friendly to pedestrians and other users of public space.
Yeah, we've been able to really leverage the comprehensive plan I don't foresee a gas station happening on that site. I'll just say that. We worked with one developer who was interested initially in doing that, and we're really firm about that not being a good use of that. Yeah, I think that folks that are expressing interest in that site are coming in with housing ideas, but the challenge is that it's zoned for commercial, so they're allowed to do housing over non-residential use, but a lot of these developers aren't as comfortable doing the commercial piece. So they're good at housing. So it's a tricky situation.
What are your thoughts on like a 5/1 in that location?
Ooh.
I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, I think that type of situation. We're looking for something that has some urban density here, but the zoning, I think the zoning allows for about 40 units on the site, so it's not
quite that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Cummings, 5/1, does that equal 6 stories?
I mean, really, it's really a 1 plus whatever, right? It doesn't have to be 5/1, but they're just commonly referred to this as this idea of a kind of a concrete first floor, and then above that would be a wood frame residential area. But it doesn't have to be 5/1. It could be a 3/1. It could be it could be a 2/1, though those are a little bit harder to pencil out. But the idea is just simply that it's typically commercial on that first floor, and that's the masonry construction, and then you have wood frame construction above that where residences would be.
I mean, whatever. So when we're obviously supporting things that meet our city's code, and that there are we have plan development guidelines that allow for some more flexibility to create higher density situation. But so anything that really is consistent with our city standards, we're very interested in discussing. But I think the combination of housing and commercial has been a hard one to figure out on this site for a lot of these potential developers. So
Understood.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for beaming in from warmer climates. I can tell you that the wind here has been like 40 knots. It's been horrible. So enjoy yourselves.
I mean, we just had tornadoes and storms, so like it's not just yesterday actually. So yeah, it's at least where I am.
All right. Well, we'll all carry on. How's that? Enjoy the Bahamas, Miss Butler. All right.
Thank you.
Anything else here tonight? It was very good. Was it helpful?
Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, didn't we do the minutes? We did the minutes. Just to make sure, I'm reminded by my keeper here. Approval of minutes, February 6th. We did. All right.
We did.
We're very efficient tonight. Good job. All right. Anything else? No. All right. So then I will now close this meeting and see you all in the beginning of April. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
letting us
Julian.
work remotely.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, we're good.